Have you ever wondered why some people are able to break family ties and move on without looking back, while others carry that guilt for the rest of their lives? What goes on in the mind of someone who decides to cut off relationships with the very people who were supposed to be closest to them? Today, we're diving into one of the most complex and painful topics of the human experience. And I promise you, the final insight in this video will completely change how you see family relationships. Buckle up, because what Socrates uncovered over 2,000 years ago may be exactly what you need to hear right now. If you're here, chances are you've felt the weight of a toxic family relationship yourself, or you know someone who's struggling with this dilemma. Subscribe to the channel now, because we're about to explore deep truths that are rarely talked about openly. And I promise you, what you're about to hear can transform how you understand freedom, loyalty, and the true meaning of family. Socrates was walking through the streets of Athens when a young man approached him, clearly distressed. The young man had just cut ties with his father, a respected figure in the city, but a tyrant behind closed doors. He asked Socrates whether he had committed a grave mistake, whether he was a man without character for abandoning his own family. Socrates' response was so unexpected that it left not only the young man, but everyone around them completely silent. Socrates looked him straight in the eyes and said something revolutionary for that time. He asked whether a shoemaker who makes bad shoes should still be called a shoemaker. The young man replied that no, the title requires competence. Then Socrates continued with the sharp wisdom that made him immortal. He asked whether a father who fails in his role, who causes more pain than love, who destroys instead of builds, truly deserves to be called a father simply because he biologically created a child. That question echoed through the centuries and reaches us today with incredible force. We're talking about a truth that society desperately tries to sweep under the rug. The idea that blood ties are sacred and unbreakable, regardless of how people behave, is one of the cruelest mental prisons we carry. And Socrates, with his philosophical brilliance, was pointing directly at that trap. Think about this for a moment. From a young age, we're taught that family is everything, that we must always forgive, that blood is thicker than anything else. But is that really true? Or does that belief simply keep people trapped in abusive, toxic, and destructive situations in the name of a loyalty that only flows one way? Modern psychology backs up what Socrates understood more than 2,000 years ago. Psychologist Joshua Coleman, a leading expert on family estrangement, has found in his research that many people who cut ties with their families report significant improvements in mental health, reduced anxiety and depression, and a noticeable increase in overall quality of life. So why then do we feel so much guilt when we make that choice? The answer lies in what the Stoics called false impressions. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, wrote in his Meditations that it's not events themselves that disturb us, but the judgments we make about them. When you distance yourself from a toxic family, it's not the act itself that causes the suffering, it's the limiting beliefs planted in your mind about what that decision supposedly says about you. Socrates understood that true wisdom begins the moment we question everything, especially the truths we were never allowed to question. And family, my friend, is one of those sacred territories that few people dare to enter with brutal honesty. But if you want to live an authentic life, one guided by reason rather than fear of other people's opinions, you need that courage. Let me tell you something that may completely shift how you see this. Epictetus, another giant of Stoicism who was born a slave and became one of the most influential philosophers in history, taught that we only have control over our own choices and judgments. Everything else, including the behavior of our parents, siblings, or relatives, is entirely outside our control. Trying to change them, or waiting for them to become who we wish they were, is an endless source of unnecessary suffering. And here's the crucial point that many people fail to see. When you choose to step away from a dysfunctional family, You are not abandoning anyone, you're simply acknowledging a reality that already existed. You're stopping the pretense that there's a healthy connection where there is only toxicity. You're choosing your own mental well-being instead of sacrificing it on the altar of social expectations that make no sense at all. Now let's go even deeper into this, because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you've been taught about family loyalty. Socrates didn't stop with that first answer to the young Athenian. He continued, and what came next was even more powerful. Socrates explained that there are two kinds of family. The first is the family of blood, the one we don't choose, the one we're born into by sheer chance. The second is the family of virtue, the one we build through conscious choices, grounded in mutual respect, genuine love and shared values. And here's the shocking part. Socrates believed the second kind is infinitely more important than the first. Imagine the courage it took to say this in a society where family structure was almost a sacred institution. But Socrates wasn't interested in pleasing people. He was interested in truth. And the truth is that countless people live entire lives of deep misery because they believe they owe unconditional loyalty to those who systematically harm them. Modern neuroscience reveals something fascinating here. Research by psychologist Kylie Aglias, one of the world's leading experts on family estrangement, shows that the brains of people raised in toxic family environments develop stress response patterns similar to those of soldiers in combat zones. Yes, you heard that right. Simply being near certain family members can trigger the same trauma mechanisms as life-threatening situations. So let me ask you something. If being around someone puts you in a constant state of alertness, anxiety, and fear, why on earth should you keep that person in your life just because you share DNA? Does that make any sense? The Stoics would say no, absolutely not. And Socrates would completely agree, but this is where it gets really interesting, so pay close attention. The moment you choose to distance yourself from a toxic family, society rushes to judge you. People question your character, your gratitude, even your humanity. And do you know why? Because your courage exposes their cowardice, their fear of making the same choice themselves. If this message is resonating with you so far, hit the like button. It helps more people find these ideas, and make sure to subscribe, because this is just the beginning of a deep journey we're taking together. Marcus Aurelius wrote something that should be engraved in the mind of anyone facing this dilemma. He said that we have the power not to form an opinion about something, and by not forming an opinion, we are not disturbed by it. Nothing troubles us by itself, only our interpretation of it does. Applied to our situation, the problem isn't cutting ties with a toxic family. The problem is how we interpret that decision. Do you see yourself as an ungrateful child, or as someone who finally had the courage to protect their mental and emotional well-being? Do you interpret it as abandonment, or as liberation? That difference in interpretation is the difference between a life consumed by guilt and a life grounded in genuine peace. Let me introduce you to a Stoic concept called preferred indifference. The Stoics believed that some things are desirable, but not essential to happiness. Having a loving family is preferable, of course, but it is not essential for living a good, virtuous, and fulfilling life. What is essential is living according to reason, with integrity, and protecting your ability to make conscious, healthy choices. Think about that family member who constantly criticizes you, who dismisses your feelings, who turns every gathering into an emotional minefield. Think about that parent who used you as a punching bag, physically or emotionally. Think about that sibling who always sabotaged you, who never celebrated your wins, who feeds off your pain. Now answer with brutal honesty. Do you truly owe these people anything beyond basic civility? Socrates shocked Athens not just with his questions, but with his willingness to live by the answers he reached. He refused to submit to social conventions when they conflicted with reason, and that is exactly what we must learn. This isn't about being rebellious for the sake of it. It's about having the integrity to align your actions with what you know deep in your soul to be true. Trauma expert Judith Herman coined the term complex trauma to describe what happens in chronically dysfunctional family environments. This kind of trauma is especially destructive because it comes from the very people who were supposed to protect us. It represents a profound betrayal of basic human trust. And according to Herman, recovery from this type of trauma often requires physical and emotional distance from the source of harm. So when Socrates told the young Athenian that a father who does not act like a father does not deserve the title, he wasn't being cruel or disrespectful. He was being radically honest. He was freeing that young man from a mental prison built by society. And that same freedom is available to you right now, in this very moment. But what about guilt? Guilt, that emotion that eats away at us, keeps us awake at night, and makes us question every decision. The Stoics were very clear about this. Epictetus taught that guilt is only appropriate when we act against our rational and virtuous nature. Protecting yourself from abuse does not violate your nature. On the contrary, it is the purest expression of self-respect and wisdom. Let's move into even deeper territory now, because what I'm about to reveal can completely change the way you see not only your family, but your entire existence. Socrates had a peculiar method of teaching, one that relied on asking questions that forced people to confront their own contradictions. And when it comes to family, we are immersed in some of the greatest contradictions of all. Think about this fundamental contradiction. We say we love our family unconditionally, yet at the same time we tolerate destructive behavior that we would never accept from strangers. If a coworker constantly humiliated you, would you continue interacting with them? If an acquaintance emotionally manipulated you every time you met, would you keep seeking their company? Of course not. But when a family member does the exact same thing, suddenly we're expected to forgive, forget, and come back for more. Socrates would have called this self-imposed ignorance. The Stoics would go even further, describing it as a direct violation of the most sacred principle of Stoic philosophy, living in accordance with rational nature. There is nothing rational about voluntarily submitting yourself to situations that destroy your peace of mind, your self-worth, and your ability to thrive. Now let me tell you about something the psychiatrist Carl Jung discovered that connects perfectly with what Socrates taught. Jung spoke of the shadow, the part of ourselves that we repress, deny, and hide. And very often, toxic family dynamics survive precisely because everyone involved refuses to look at their own shadow. The narcissistic mother who never acknowledges the harm she causes, the authoritarian father who never admits his mistakes, the jealous sibling who always finds a justification for their hostility. When you choose to step away from this system, you are not simply distancing yourself from specific people. You are refusing to participate in a collective game of denial. You are saying no to the shared lie that keeps everyone trapped in destructive patterns. And that, my friend, requires extraordinary strength of character. Marcus Aurelius, who had one of the most complicated families imaginable, wrote something profoundly liberating in his meditations. He said that when you wake up in the morning, you should remind yourself that you will encounter intrusive, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, envious, and antisocial people. And why are they this way? Because they cannot distinguish good from evil, but you can. And that changes everything. Do you see the wisdom in that? Marcus Aurelius is not telling you to tolerate abuse. He's telling you to understand that toxic people act out of ignorance, and that once you know what is right, you have a responsibility to protect yourself. You are not being vengeful or cruel by walking away. You are simply exercising practical wisdom. But here is an even deeper truth that few people have the courage to face. Sometimes the most toxic person in a family dynamic is not the one who causes the direct harm, but the one who makes you feel guilty for protecting yourself from that harm. The relative who tells you you're being dramatic, that you're overreacting, that you should be more understanding. That person is, in fact, complicit in the abuse and may be even more dangerous than the primary abuser. Socrates faced this constantly. He was accused of corrupting the youth simply because he taught people how to think for themselves. In the end, he was sentenced to death for it. Yet, even in the face of death, Socrates did not retreat from his truths. He drank the hemlock with a serenity that astonished even his executioners. Why? Because he knew he was living in alignment with his deepest principles. So now I ask you, are you living according to your principles or according to other people's expectations? Are your choices guided by reason or by fear of what others might think? This is the fundamental Socratic question you must answer for yourself. The anthropologist Margaret Mead studied dozens of different cultures and discovered something fascinating. In some societies, family ties are extremely loose, and this does not lead to social collapse. People form communities based on affinity, shared values, and mutual respect, not blood. And these societies are not less functional or less happy. In many cases, they are more harmonious, precisely because people actively choose who they want to be close to. This shows us that the idea that blood family is sacred and unquestionable is merely a cultural construct, not a universal law of human nature. And if it is just a cultural construct, then it can be questioned, re-evaluated, and if necessary, rejected when it no longer serves our well-being. The Stoics had a beautiful expression, amor fati, love of fate. But they were not telling you to passively accept everything that happens to you. They were saying that you should accept what you cannot control and act decisively on what you can. You cannot control the fact that you were born into a dysfunctional family, but you can absolutely control how much time and energy you give to those people. Epictetus, who was brutally mistreated by his owner when he was enslaved, built his philosophy around clearly distinguishing what is within our control and what is not. And you know what is not within our control? Other people's behavior, including that of our family members. And what is within our control? Our response to that behavior, our decision to stay or to leave, our choice to allow or not allow those people to continue affecting our inner peace. When you deeply internalize this distinction, something almost magical happens. The guilt begins to dissolve, because you realize that you are not abandoning anyone. You are simply acknowledging your limits and exercising your fundamental right to protect your own humanity. There is a powerful study conducted by sociologist Lucy Blake from the University of Essex that followed hundreds of people who cut ties with their families. The results were striking. Most reported that the decision, although extremely difficult, was the best choice they had ever made. They described feelings of relief, liberation, and for the first time in their lives, the ability to breathe without the constant pressure of family toxicity. Now we've reached a crucial point in this journey, and I need you to understand something. Socrates spent his entire life trying to teach the people of Athens. True wisdom isn't about accumulating knowledge. It's about having the courage to apply that knowledge, even when it means standing against everyone else. And when it comes to breaking away from a toxic family, that courage is tested to its absolute limit. Socrates used to ask his interlocutors a devastating question. If you know what's right, why don't you act accordingly? That simple question exposes our greatest weakness as human beings. Deep down, we know when a relationship is destroying us. We feel it in our bodies, in our minds, in our souls, and yet we keep going back, we keep submitting, we keep hoping that somehow everything will magically change. The Stoics called this a faulty judgment. You form a false belief about the situation, things like, but she's my mother, I have to put up with it, or family is family, I can't walk away. That false belief traps you in an endless cycle of suffering. But here's the liberating truth. You can change that judgment right now, at this very moment. Let me tell you about a revolutionary practice Marcus Aurelius used every single day. He called it negative visualization, but not in the pessimistic way you might be imagining. He would picture losing everything, all the people in his life, all his possessions, all his status. And do you know why? To realize that his inner peace didn't depend on anything external, not even family. Now apply that to your own situation. Imagine your life without that toxic family member, not in a vengeful or angry way, just as a mental experiment. How would you feel? Lighter, freer, more able to be yourself without fear of judgment or attack? If the answer is yes, then you already know what you need to do. The only thing stopping you is fear. And what is that fear exactly? Fear of being judged by society, fear of being alone, fear of admitting that the people who were supposed to love you the most are actually causing you more harm than good. Socrates would say that all of these fears are based on external opinions, not internal truths. And living according to external opinions is the surest way to waste your one and only life. Seneca, another giant of Stoic philosophy, wrote something that should be required reading for anyone facing this dilemma. He said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." Think about that. Breaking away from a toxic family feels impossible because you haven't yet had the courage to take the first step. But the moment you do, the entire dynamic changes. Here's something modern trauma psychology teaches us, something that aligns perfectly with Stoic philosophy. When you live in a chronically stressful and abusive environment, your brain enters what we call survival mode. In that state, you're not really living. You're just enduring. Your creativity dies, your joy disappears, your ability to form healthy relationships becomes severely compromised. And here's the worst part. You don't even realize how compromised you are, because that state becomes your normal. It's like the frog in slowly boiling water. It doesn't jump out because it doesn't notice the danger until it's too late. But unlike the frog, you have the ability to reason, to make conscious choices, to save yourself before it's too late. Socrates once had a student named Alcibiades, a brilliant young man but deeply troubled. He came from a powerful yet profoundly dysfunctional family. Socrates spent years trying to teach him that his loyalty should be to virtue, not to a family name. Eventually, Alcibiades understood this and made radical decisions that shocked Athens. He wasn't perfect in his choices, but at least he had the courage to choose. And that's the core issue here, the courage to choose. Because while you don't choose, life chooses for you. And the default choice is always to stay with what's familiar, even when what's familiar is toxic. As human beings, we have a strange tendency to prefer known suffering over an unknown possibility, even when that unknown could be infinitely better. Now here's a hard truth I need to share with you. When you finally break away from a toxic family, many people will walk away from you too. The relatives who said you were overreacting, the friends who insisted you should give them one more chance. The acquaintances who judged you without understanding anything. And you know what? That's a good thing, because those people were never really your people either. The Stoics believed that life has a way of clearing from our path what no longer serves us. When you make a courageous decision aligned with your deepest values, life responds by removing the influences that would have pulled you back. It's painful in the moment, but absolutely necessary for growth. There's a fascinating study by psychologist Eli Finkel from Northwestern University on quality versus quantity in relationships. He found that having even one deep, genuine, healthy relationship is far more beneficial to your well-being than having dozens of shallow or toxic relationships, even if those relationships are with family. Low-quality connection is worse than true solitude. So when someone asks how you can live without your family, you can answer with Socratic wisdom. I didn't live without family. I simply replaced a family that was destroying me with a family I chose, one built on real love, mutual respect, and shared growth. Because in the end, family isn't about blood, it's about who's willing to bleed for you. Marcus Aurelius ruled the greatest empire the world had ever known and dealt daily with betrayal, including from his own wife and son. And yet, he maintained his inner peace through a simple principle. Nothing outside your control can disturb you unless you allow it to. He couldn't control the betrayals, but he could control his response. And that choice made all the difference. We're getting close to the most powerful revelation of all. But before that, I need to show you something that will completely reorganize how you understand loyalty and betrayal. In the final days of his life, as he awaited execution, Socrates was visited by friends who begged him to flee Athens. Everything was arranged. He could have escaped easily and lived out his remaining years in peace, but he refused. And the reason for that refusal reveals something profound about conscious choice versus imposed obligation. Socrates explained that he had chosen to live in Athens, to abide by its laws, and that even though he believed the sentence was unjust, it was a consequence of choices he had made freely. But here's the crucial point most people get wrong. He was talking about obligations he consciously chose, not obligations forced upon him by others. Did you choose to be born into your family? No. Did you consent to being mistreated? No. So why the hell do you feel obligated to remain loyal to a contract you never signed? This distinction is absolutely fundamental, and most people never see it. The Stoics were crystal clear about this. You have obligations only to what you consciously choose and what aligns with virtue. You are not obligated to stay in situations that violate your basic human dignity, no matter who is responsible for that violation. Epictetus, who understood suffering at the hands of power better than almost anyone, taught something radical. He said, "You always have a choice, even when it seems like you don't." When his master deliberately broke his leg, Epictetus couldn't control that act, but he could control how he interpreted and responded to it. And eventually, when the opportunity arose, he made the only logical choice. He removed himself from that environment forever. Now think about the tragic irony of that. Epictetus, an ex-slave, had more courage to leave an abusive situation than millions of people today who are technically free, yet remain trapped in destructive family dynamics out of fear of social judgment. So who is really free? Neuroscience reveals something unsettling about traumatic relationships. There's a phenomenon called trauma bonding, where the victim develops an intense emotional attachment to the abuser. This happens especially in families because abuse is mixed with moments of affection, creating an emotional roller coaster that literally rewires your brain chemistry. You become addicted to the cycle of pain and temporary relief. Socrates would have called this being a slave to your passions. Rationally, you know you should leave, but emotionally, you're imprisoned. And the only way to break that cycle is through reason applied with relentless discipline. You have to force your rational mind to take back control from your conditioned emotions. Marcus Aurelius practiced a daily exercise that could save you from this prison. Every morning he asked himself, "What is the most important thing I can do today to live according to my rational nature?" And every night he reviewed his actions, asking whether he had lived with integrity. Now imagine applying that to your family situation. Every morning asking yourself, is staying in this toxic relationship aligned with my rational nature? You already know the answer, but here's the part that may be hard to hear. Often, the person who most prevents you from breaking away from a toxic family isn't a relative. It's you. It's the part of you that still believes you can fix things. That if you just try a little harder, be more understanding, more patient, more forgiving, you'll finally earn the love and acceptance you've always wanted. Socrates would have a devastating response to that. You're chasing an illusion. You're trying to squeeze water from a stone, and while you waste your energy on an impossible pursuit, you're neglecting the people who actually love and value you. You're betraying yourself in the name of a loyalty that was never reciprocated. Psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, wrote something that connects perfectly with Stoicism. He said that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our power to choose our response. And in that choice lies our growth and our freedom. Yes, your family may be toxic, that's the stimulus, but your response, that part is entirely yours. You can keep going back, hoping for miraculous change, accepting crumbs of affection between mountains of abuse. Or you can choose your own peace, your own sanity, your own life. And don't mistake what's at stake here. It is your life, not just your quality of life, but your very essence, your ability to be who you truly are. During his trial, Socrates said something that has echoed through centuries: the unexamined life is not worth living. So let me ask you now, are you truly examining your life, or are you just living on autopilot, repeating patterns, because that's how it's always been? Are you making conscious choices, or merely reacting to old conditioning? The answers to these questions determine whether you're living as a free, rational human being, or as an automaton programmed by social expectations and manipulated guilt. And that difference, my friend, is the difference between a life of authentic meaning and a life of silent suffering. The Stoics believed the highest good you can achieve is tranquility of the soul. They called it ataraxia, a state of inner calm where external events no longer toss you around emotionally. And I can promise you this: you will never reach that state while you remain trapped in relationships that systematically destroy your inner peace. So the question isn't whether you should break away from a toxic family. The real question is, how much longer will you wait to do what you already know needs to be done? How much more of your one precious life will you sacrifice on the altar of expectations that never made sense? How much longer will you postpone your own freedom? And now we arrive at the final revelation, the one I promised at the beginning, the one with the power to completely transform your perspective. Brace yourself, because this goes against everything you were taught, yet it may be the most liberating truth you hear today. Socrates, shortly before drinking the hemlock that would end his life, gathered his disciples and said something that stunned them all. He declared that he was happy to die because he would finally be freed from the chains of the body and the opinions of society. But that wasn't what struck them the most. What truly shook them was when he looked each of them in the eyes and said, "The greatest betrayal you can ever commit is not against your family, your friends, or your country. The greatest betrayal you can commit is against yourself." Let that sink deeply into your awareness. Every time you remain in a situation that violates your dignity, every time you tolerate abuse in the name of family loyalty, every time you silence your truth just to keep the peace, you are committing the ultimate betrayal. You are betraying your own soul. And here's the part that will turn your world upside down. When you walk away from a toxic family, you are not being selfish. You are, for the first time, being truly loving. Because you are practicing self-respect, and self-love is the foundation of all genuine love. You cannot give what you do not have. If you don't love and respect yourself enough to set healthy boundaries, how can you truly love anyone else? Marcus Aurelius, in one of his most profound reflections, wrote that each of us is a single note in a vast cosmic symphony. Our responsibility is not to play the note others demand from us, but to play our own note with clarity and authenticity. When you remain in a toxic family environment, you are constantly out of tune, distorting your natural sound just to survive the dissonance around you. And do you know what happens when you finally step away from that dissonance? You discover who you really are. You find your own voice, your own values, your own dreams, long buried beneath layers of other people's expectations. That discovery, that rebirth, is impossible while you remain trapped in that system. Now comes the most radical truth of all, and I need your full attention. Socrates didn't die for abstract philosophical ideas. He died because he taught people to think for themselves, to question authority, including family authority, And that is such a threat to entrenched power structures that they literally killed him for it. When you break away from a toxic family, you're not just freeing yourself. You are declaring to the world that there are things more important than keeping appearances, more important than preserving dysfunctional systems, more important than perpetuating generational cycles of abuse. You are saying, it stops here with me. And that declaration has the power to transform not only your life, but the lives of generations to come. Think about your future children, nieces, nephews, or any child who might be watching you. What do you want to teach them? That they should endure abuse because family is sacred, or that they should protect their dignity and well-being above all else, even when it requires painful decisions? Your example can break chains that have been passed down for generations. Epictetus said something extraordinary about freedom. He taught that the truly free person is the one who fears nothing and desires nothing that lies outside their control. Toxic families operate in direct opposition to this truth. They teach you to fear rejection, judgment, and guilt, and to desperately crave approval that never genuinely comes. But when you cut those emotional strings, when you stop fearing what they think and stop craving what they will never give you, you experience true freedom for the first time in your life. And that freedom, my friend, is priceless. It is worth every moment of discomfort, every second of temporary guilt, every instant of early loneliness. Because here is the final secret Socrates understood. The loneliness of being alone is infinitely better than the loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't see you, don't hear you, and don't value you. Have you ever been at a family gathering and felt completely invisible? Spoken, yet no one truly listened, shared an achievement only to receive criticism disguised as concern. That is the most devastating kind of loneliness. And when you finally step away from it, when you find your true tribe, people who choose you because they genuinely love you, you realize you were never truly alone. You were simply surrounded by the wrong people. So here is my final challenge to you, inspired directly by the Socratic method. I want you to answer one question with brutal honesty. If you knew you only had 5 years left to live, would you continue investing your time and emotional energy in people who consistently make you feel worse about yourself? If you've watched this far, type in the comments, "I choose my peace." Those 4 words are a declaration of independence. A promise to yourself, a step toward the life you truly deserve. And look, I know this isn't easy. Socrates knew it wasn't easy. The Stoics knew it wasn't easy. But easy and right are rarely the same thing. And at the end of your life, when you look back, you won't regret having courage. You'll only regret the moments when you didn't. Life is far too short, too precious, too sacred to be wasted in relationships that diminish you. You deserve to be loved, respected, and valued. And if your biological family cannot or will not do that, then you have every right, every reason, and all the wisdom you need to build your own family based on choice rather than accident of birth. If you've made it this far, if these words resonated with your soul, I invite you to subscribe to the channel now. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. Leave a like so more people can find this reflection. And in the comments, tell me, which revelation impacted you the most? On the screen, I'll leave 2 more videos to deepen this journey of self-discovery and liberation. One on how to rebuild your life after breaking away from a toxic family, and another on how to recognize emotional manipulation before it destroys you. They are essential continuations of this conversation. Remember, you are not abandoning anyone. You are finally finding yourself. And that is the greatest gift you can give, not only to yourself, but to the world. Because a free, whole, and authentic person has the power to transform everything around them. Socrates chose to die free rather than live imprisoned. You don't need to die. You just need the courage to live, truly live. I'll see you in the next video.